It's the year 2025, and the human race has become increasingly creatively stagnant. Movies that dominate the box office are adaptations of already existing properties. Remakes of timeless classics have taken over the industry. Creators even got bored of making remakes and started making secret sequels disguised as remakes to spice things up. But even that is getting old. Originality is becoming so scarce nowadays, people are even resorting to robots to be creative for them. But what fascinates me the most in this everlasting era of remakes, reboots, remasters, and rehashes is its prevalence in video games. Today, I'll be talking about the OFF Remaster. OFF is an RPG Maker psychological horror game made by Mortis Ghost with music by Elias Conrad Coldwood. Released in 2008 in French, and then received an English patch in 2011. Right after Corpse Party and Yume Nikki, OFF is undoubtedly up there as one of the most influential RPG Maker horror games to ever exist. The game has a unique style and vibe that I personally haven't quite experienced in a game since. From unconventional battle music that sounds like an electro swing band was thrown in an oil drum and kicked down the stairs, a monochromatic art style, there's a whale, to genuinely tense and unsettling moments, OFF is an absolute work of art. And hey, it's free! You could play it right now! However, OFF bears a very unfortunate curse. If you ever find yourself showing this wonderful little title to an audience, there's two things you need to brace yourself for. First thing is the joke. Well, Spooty, are you beating off today? You're finishing the game today? So in other words, you're gonna beat off? Yay, Spoonie, you beat off! You see, it's cute because everyone who says it thinks they're the first person who thought of it. The second thing is, wow, this is just like Undertale. Is this Undertale? That character reminds me of Undertale. Person who's only played Undertale, getting real big Undertale vibes from this. So let's fast forward to 2015, when Undertale was first released. I had originally heard about it because I heard it was made by Toby Fox, who was a prominent composer for the multimedia webcomic Homestuck. In fact, he was my favorite composer, and when I'd heard that one of my favorite songs of his was in the game, I was like, wow, that's so cool. I eventually need to check this out. However, the thing that got me really interested in playing Undertale, I had a friend approach me and say, "You like OFF, right? It's kind of like OFF." Hearing that, I lost my mind a little and needed to play this game immediately. OFF was and still is one of my favorite games of all time, so hearing that, I was absolutely going to check Undertale out. My first experience with Undertale was strange. I remember getting past Toriel and being like, okay, this is it. This is when the tables will turn and this game starts fucking with me. Then I go to shake this dude's hand and I'm sure Undertale needs no introduction, so I'll skip that, but the entire game felt like this for me my first time playing it. I kept waiting for it to get creepier, kept waiting for it to get weird and esoteric and fucked up, or even having it inspire me to start asking questions about what everything was all about. I was going in expecting OFF and not getting it. Then it would have these bait and switch moments where I was like, oh, there it is, it's about to get fucked up. Then it'd be like, ha, psych! Did you really think this was that kind of game? The most OFF-like sequence in the entire game, at least in the True Pacifist run, was when you go back to the lab and fight the amalgams, but even that didn't come super close, as they continued to do the funny, haha, whoops, it's not actually scary bait and switch. Not to mention the entire area kind of spells everything out for you, whereas the writing in OFF leaves a lot of gaps for you to fill yourself. In Undertale's defense, it wasn't trying to be OFF. It not being like off is not a fault whatsoever. I just went in expecting it to be something it wasn't. There's clear off inspiration in the simplistic style, and Papyrus is absolutely just Dodon if you washed his mouth out with soap. While Undertale is absolutely a derivative work, it has its own unique identity. And so does Off. Well, about that. Ever since the release of Undertale, I've noticed a significant shift in how people talk about and describe Off. My absolute favorite has been Undertale, as directed by David Lynch. It's not inaccurate. People are incapable of selling this game without also mentioning Undertale, which has become the poster child of indie games, despite Undertale, as I just established, being a very different game with a very different vibe and style of storytelling from Off. Much like me going into Undertale expecting Off, I'd imagine an Undertale fan going into Off expecting Undertale would be equally disappointed, which is why it upsets me that Off, and even games like Yume Nikki and Earthbound, are overshadowed by Undertale's popularity to the point that they are all reduced to those games that inspired Undertale, and are often only admired for having Undertale qualities to them, despite those qualities being ones that they founded and should be credited for themselves. So in 2024, they announced an OFF Remaster. This was huge! While Off is a free game, having a Steam and Switch release meant more people were going to play and experience Off for the first time. And this was exciting. It even looked like there were new areas and bonus content they were going to explore. It also looked faithful to the original, just with a bit of polish and UI upgrades, which was perfect. Or, so I thought. One night I was having dinner with my friend and I had to break the bad news to them. I mentioned that Elias Conrad Coldwood, the original composer of Off, did not sign on to have his music used for the remaster, but agreed to them replacing the music with their own original compositions. They released the replacement for Pepper Steak, I told them, and you'll never guess who composed it. Who? My friend asks. Toby Fox. Fangamer released Toby Fox's White Meat on their YouTube, alongside a link to an interview with Toby Fox about composing for the remaster. He says, obviously Fangamer and Mortis wanted to use the original soundtrack. They tried to reach out to the composer, ACC, to get the rights to use it, but ultimately he felt nervous about signing anything and disappeared. However, he has stated that he doesn't mind that his music isn't being used, and he has no problem with the new soundtrack. So it's a bit weird, but everything is chill. That being said, Off is a very atmospheric and memorable game, and the soundtrack contributed a lot to that. It's an integral part of the memories that people have built of this game. Trying to replace those songs feels like breaking into somebody's house and pasting your face into their family photo album. White Meat was met with polarizing reactions. People either hate it or are afraid to waver their undying loyalty to Toby Fox and just say they like it. but in Toby's defense, Pepper Steak is an unforgettable track and the staple of Off. Even if you've never heard of the game, you have probably heard Pepper Steak. Asking someone to capture the same vibes and energy as Pepper Steak without just making Pepper Steak is like asking someone to recreate a gourmet meal from a 5-star restaurant without a goddamn recipe. Like, bro. Side note, in my honest opinion, I don't think Toby's composition style works for a soundtrack like Off. The Off soundtrack draws heavy inspiration from composers like Akira Yamaoka, the composer for the Silent Hill series, and those tracks range anywhere from and that just doesn't feel like Toby's wheelhouse. Soon after Toby Fox was announced as a guest composer, it was revealed that Morusk, a composer for the indie game Stray, and Night Margin, the dev and composer for One Shot, would also be guest composers for the remaster. It was becoming apparent that development for this project was becoming a sort of celebration of Off's impact on the indie gaming scene, which is a really sweet sentiment, honestly. Night Margin ended up sneaking a tribute to their late friend Felix the Judge into their own musical contribution to the remaster. Felix was the creator of the popular OFF fan game Home, and also a huge inspiration to Night Margin in general, so using a small piano sample that they originally made for Felix for a project years ago is an incredibly sweet sentiment and a wonderful way to honor Felix's name. I'm sure he'd be delighted to know he is now officially part of OFF. Hearing this story, I was starting to get excited for this remaster. Inviting multiple composers who were inspired by OFF to work on the soundtrack was sounding more and more appealing to me, and viewing this remaster more as a celebration of all the cool games it inspired rather than a one-to-one remake was giving me higher hopes. Then the demo came out. At the end of May 2025, a prologue was released where you could play Zone 0 and Zone 1 from the remaster in full. Naturally, I downloaded it immediately, eager to see how they portrayed one of my all-time favorite games. I went in with an open mind, ready to hear music and ambiance I wasn't used to and embracing it as a fan portrayal, because that's kind of what it all was. I enjoyed the little bits of polish, added animations and flavor, the UI, though lurking beneath the surface, there was just something wrong. Originally, the fish that popped up here was Dopefish, who is a little fish that appears as a cameo in several games as a bit of an inside joke. Sort of like 0451 from System Shock. Replacing that with an annoying dog cameo somewhat confirmed my suspicions that someone somewhere on the team was leaning into making OFF's identity Undertale inspiration. The game! I was annoyed, but I shook it off. Got him. And continued making my way through the demo. My favorite addition was absolutely the menu they added for Zachary. It adds a lot of flavor and charm, and as much as I liked it, that sneaking suspicion came back. The cutesy style was very reminiscent of the shop scenes from Undertale, so it wouldn't surprise me if this decision was made to even further appeal to an audience that was inevitably going to be showing up solely because their senpai, Toby Fox, made some tracks for the game. Still, I trudged onward. I even started to get used to white meat, even though I dearly missed pepper steak. Though, as a side note, replacing Flesh Maze Tango with subpar elevator music sure was a choice! The song is fine, but it's not Flesh Maze Tango. Finally, I get to the end of Zone 1. The end of the demo. The fight with Dodon. Who is, as many people know, huge inspiration for Papyrus of Undertale fame. I'm interested to hear how Dodon's new boss music sounds. The original is tense, haunting, intimidating. It feels so authoritative and even a little melancholy. Wow, okay, strong start, perhaps a bit of a departure from the original. Okay, alright. I dig it. The melody comes in, and right out the gate, Bone Trousel jump scare. What is essentially a Bone Trousel remix is now Dodon's boss battle theme in the OFF Remaster. Now, including a little Papyrus leitmotif in Dodon's boss theme is not a big deal. In fact, if it were more subtle, I think it'd be a sweet nod to how Dodon inspired Papyrus as a character. There's a remix of Pepper Steak I really like by Aliens Umbra that sneaks in a little reference to Ghost Fight at the end, seeing as Pepper Steak was a very big inspiration for that song, and I think something like that is very charming. But just making Dodon's battle theme Bone Trousel. Oh! I don't know whose decision this was, but judging by the aforementioned quote by Toby Fox, literally saying he felt weird, like he was breaking into someone's house and replacing all the family photos with pictures of him, I really doubt that this was his own decision. Toby Fox has also never been like the egotistical type to do anything for his ego, so this reeks of higher-ups pushing for the Undertale angle to sell the game better, since Undertale is so goddamn popular, but that's purely speculation, a game theory, if you will. I personally do not like this as a fan of both OFF and Undertale. I appreciate the sentiment of using this remaster as a celebration of games that OFF has inspired, but I think in order to do that properly, OFF's individuality should remain intact. Replacing Dodon's theme with a theme of a character that's way more popular than him just kind of reduces him to Papyrus Zero, and I hate that. The good thing is the original still exists. You can still play the original for free anytime you want, and I get that. However, the issue isn't so much about the original existing and being available. The problem is how this affects and distorts the public's view of OFF even further. This remaster is going to be many people's first and possibly even only impression of OFF. There are going to be people who only ever see OFF through Undertale glasses. There are going to be Undertale fans who play this and only come away with, wow, I loved all the Undertale references this game made. There will probably even be people who end up calling OFF an Undertale ripoff. I'm tired. As an indie game developer and fan of indie games, I'm tired of everything I love being ground up into the Undertale meta. Undertale was a game that made a pretty big impact and resonated with a lot of people. I get it. But I think the things that helped bring Undertale into existence should be recognized as their own individual properties and appreciated and remembered for what they are on their own. And I find it pretty distasteful and downright disrespectful that they would partially write over OFF's identity by putting in Undertale references every moment they can. Even if this was Mortis Ghost's decision or he approved of it, I just don't like it. I simply do not like it. Video game remakes are made for many different reasons. To profit off of nostalgia, to make a game the way the devs originally intended, and I feel most importantly for game preservation and accessibility. Yes, the original OFF is still out there for free, and it feels you can't get more accessible than that, but OFF's original popularity was reliant solely on word of mouth and a huge, loving community of loyal fans. And now it seems its resurgence and popularity is being hinged entirely on references to a game that partially owes its existence to it. I get why Toby Fox said how he feels like he's breaking into someone's house and putting his face into the family photo album, because yeah, that's what it feels like. It feels like they're rewriting history for personal gain. And I'm scared. I'm scared of people only seeing Dodon as Papyrus and Zachary as Sans. I'm scared of people's first experience with this game not having pepper steak. I'm scared of people simply not getting it. I'm just scared of my favorite indie horror game being overwritten by Undertale. Slight addendum, but I wanted to add that I did later play the genocide route for Undertale and went, oh, okay, this is why my friend was comparing it to OFF. But that doesn't change the fact that my first time playing, I was thoroughly confused as to why anyone would compare the two games. Thank you. Howdy, thanks for watching my video. I know it's a bit of a departure from my usual stuff I post on here, but I figured, hey, I'm talking about an indie horror game and that's usually what I stream, so I think it lines up enough. So hey, if you're new here, I stream on Twitch. You can go to spoonie.live. And if you like games like OFF, well, I usually stream games like OFF, so you know. We would love to have you! I would also like to thank my top patrons at the moment. So thank you Kat, Matt, Leslie, Rory, Scorch, Sky, Tasu, Claire, Jordan, Sheeb, Z, Proxy, Spicy, Morgan, Stardust, come on, Bash, JM, Ani, Max, Axe, oh my god, that's confusing, Aaron and Quad, thank you all so much for being top patrons. And if you would like to join the Patreon, there's a link in the description. Thank you all so much for watching. Thanks for the support. Smash that subscribe button! You don't have to. Goodbye.